Okay, so funny story. So this is the episode where I'm actually going to talk about focus, and this is my second attempt at shooting this episode because the first episode was completely out of focus. So yeah. Uh, Anyways, getting on to episode 5 of How to Screw Up. For those of you who are new to the channel, I'm Piyush Verma. I'm an entrepreneur, a startup founder, a product builder, and a storyteller. I have spent the last decade of my life at startups. Uh, my I started my own company and shut it down. I worked at a startup which was funded hugely and also saw it kind of go down. And I also work with a lot of other startups and founders, even at my current day job. And this series is about my experiences, my learnings, and the sort of mistakes that I've made, which I'm sharing out here in the hopes that it might provide some value to somebody out there who might also be thinking of starting up. So that's the background. And in this episode, we're going to talk about focus. And this is something of an advice that a lot of startup founders, I'm sure, get that one must remain focused, whether it's on the idea, whether it's in philosophy, and for good reason, of course. But I kind of want to change the way we focus. Would rather remove or replace the term focus with intent. So let me give you a small background and then we'll come back to the focus changing to intentionality. So I started my company back in 2018, so this was 1 year after I'd graduated. This was a small garage and a cafe uh, where we would service motorcycles, and of course, the cafe was for eating and stuff. Uh, the idea was that these two small businesses would pay the bills, take care of the building, so on and so forth, while we were able to explore the electric vehicle market and enter it with our own product. Now, uh, we of course wanted to build motorcycles, and as part of the Baja team in college, me and my co-founders, we were already well versed with building cars that we used to race. So the garage also gave us a good experience because up to in the next 2 years we would end up servicing you know thousands of two-wheelers, and we got a pretty good idea of how these machines were built, how to take care of them, the kind of engineering that actually goes into making a vehicle. And then COVID hit. So while we had already pivoted quite a few times in the kind of vehicle that we wanted to build, when COVID hit, we almost thought it was the end of the road. So we had to kind of decide how it is that we would go ahead because we weren't allowed to uh, go to our offices, and ours was not the kind of business that you would work from home on. So, and then we made one more pivot, and we've already, I guess, spoken about uh, us pivoting quite a few times. But as I mentioned, we were experienced with building race cars in college, and to be able to fund that project, we would either seek sponsorship, or we would run this seminar or course, whatever you may call it, and we would teach students from other colleges or our juniors how to build the car, essentially what we were learning firsthand, and charge them a small amount. So this is how we used to fund. So we kind of combined these two ideas where we took all our experience of having serviced so many two-wheelers and also having had built almost a dozen custom motorcycles, and we kind of packaged all of it into an online course because online courses were all the rave back when the lockdown had just begun. And lo behold, that kind of became one of our highest revenue generating streams, at least in the past 2 years. I mean, we were doing really well. At one point, I guess we had trained almost 2,000 students from colleges, from the industry itself, and people really liked the course that we built, and they also respected the credibility that we had in the fact that we actually do this day in and day out. So that was, for us, COVID almost seemed like a blessing in disguise. But at one point, we kind of realized that, if we continue doing this, what about our original goal of actually building an electric vehicle and going to the market? So we started pulling back from the entire educational product, and we started refocusing most of our energy on the product itself and the development and so on and so forth. Now, while it might seem, and it of course did seem to us that that was the right thing to do, I feel it was slightly misguided because we were already finding it very difficult to keep ourselves alive. We did not have funding, we had pivoted a few times. Building a hardware product is difficult as it is. But this stream of revenue was actually something that kept us alive for the whole 2 years of COVID. And it was the one place where we had actually experienced what we call a product market fit. So, in retrospect, we could have actually kept it going, generating revenue, and also use that as a great launchpad for our product. Because the kind of people who were actually attending our courses were also people who were passionate about motorcycles. They could have been potential customers, we could have learned a lot from them. That could have been a great pitch to investors in terms of traction, even, if the story was told well enough. But we kind of decided in the name of focus to stop that. And this is where I think awareness plays a much more important role than focus does. There are two kinds of focus or distractions. There are two kinds of distractions. One is necessary and one is unnecessary. Or I guess distraction is probably not the right term, but we were looking at the entire education thing as a distraction, so let's just stick with that. Now, we were pivoting a lot based on our interaction with investors, based on the kind of grant we would get from an institution and what they required and so on. These were all unnecessary distraction. In fact, I was even doing wedding photography to, kind of get some extra cash in between, and that was another distraction. Uh, but was I aware of the fact that, and I kind of also treated the education part as a distraction. But had I been aware that this distraction was necessary because this is what would actually put food on the table, would keep the lights on to be able to pursue our bigger goal, was I aware of that? If I was aware of that, then I would have treated it as such. And it takes, sometimes we're so focused on the goal, which in our case was building a two-wheeler, an electric vehicle, and going to market, that we weren't able to see the smaller things which may seem unrelated, but they're actually the things that are helping you achieve that goal. So that is a necessary distraction. But yeah, and so if you're a founder who's wanting to start up, and if your startup is also something that requires intense capital, just look around and see things that you're doing day in and day out. And if you have capital, that's great. But if you don't, and you've kind of figured out a way to be able to, generate some kind of cash flow so that you can build the stream of yours, don't look at it as a distraction, but look at it as a task that actually fuels your dream and do it with intention. And that is kind of where we circle back to what I said in the beginning, that we need to replace focus with intentionality. You know, sometimes two things might seem extremely unrelated to each other, but they might both be related in the fact that one needs to be done for the other to happen. So do the first thing with intention, because that's kind of helping you achieve your second uh, thing or item on the list, which might actually be your main goal. So yeah, I guess that is it for this episode. Uh, if you found even a little bit of value, I really hope you have. Please do considering liking, sharing, and subscribing. And I'll see you in the next episode of How to Screw Up. Cheers.